Hey, Sterile Processing Universe. It's Hank Balch here with Beyond Clean. I'm on a drive, so pardon the sound quality here, but I've got something important to talk about. It's come up here recently a number of times on a number of different calls with folks around the U.S. in sterile processing departments asking me, Hank, how do we get the C-suite engaged with what's going on in sterile processing? How do I communicate to the OR the changes that are going on? How do I recognize my team in sterile processing and give them the respect that they so that they desire so much and that they deserve? And again and again, the answer to that question that I give out, or at least one part of the answer, is sterile processing department newsletters. Now, I've talked about this before. I've made videos. I don't know if I've actually written an article about it, so maybe a mental takeaway for this one is I need to write about this too. But the idea is pretty straightforward. I'm going to lay it out. I'm going to tell you what the newsletter is, how to put it together, and the tremendous value that these department newsletters bring to you as the leader who puts them together, or the leaders, what they do to your department and what they do for your frontline technicians. So let's start at the beginning. What is a sterile processing newsletter? Pretty straightforward. It can be a one-pager. It can be a multi-pager. This is a monthly update. Let's just start monthly. You can do it more, but let's just say this is a monthly update that you send out to folks around your facility that tells a story about what's going on in sterile processing. It can recognize new certifications that your staff are getting. It can give regular data updates. So what's the volume of instrumentation that's flowing through your department? How many loaners were processed last month? It can give updates on policies and procedure changes. Is the return cart for the operating room now going to be at a different location? Have you added a new shift start time for third shift? So now folks are going to be coming in earlier that the operating room would need to know about. On and on and on. Any change, it has an implication for your staff in sterile processing or your customers outside of sterile processing in the OR and the clinics and the ER, on and on. Any change, this newsletter gives you a platform to put that change in writing again and send it out to the folks that it could impact. Okay, so we've talked about recognition a little bit, like you can say what's going on, you can recognize your staff or what's going on, you can share data. As important as all that, if not even more important, you can tell your department story of process improvement, growth, advancement in your department. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but that's kind of an outline, right? So like, what is a newsletter? It's a platform, it's a format for you to communicate all those things to people on a regular basis. The majority of the newsletters that I've put together in my past, I've actually done through Microsoft PowerPoint. And, change the orientation so it's not landscape, like change it to portrait. That way it looks like a piece of paper that you're designing. I always did through PowerPoint. I was more comfortable doing it through PowerPoint. I know some of the managers who work for me who helped design the department newsletters, they use Microsoft Publisher sometimes. So whatever tool you're comfortable with, you could even create it on Microsoft Word It's a little more difficult uh, for newbies or amateurs to make Microsoft Word look sharp and not just like a real long article or a real long document, to actually make it look and feel like a newsletter, like a newspaper. But if you got the skill set, and especially as you're just starting out, it doesn't really matter what tool you use. What matters is that it looks good and that it has that information that we were just talking about before, that you're communicating something of value to anyone who might pick up that newsletter, who might see it on a bulletin board, who would open up their email to click on it and make it worth their time to open up, to give 30 seconds of their time, or to give 60 seconds of their time, or to give 5 minutes of their time to look through this newsletter. That's your primary object in creating this document every month, is to add enough information and have that information diverse enough that if an operating room nurse opens it, that there's something in there that they're going to find of value or of interest or of use to them. Same is true for any clinic customers. You know, if you're servicing a lot of clinics, you should put at least something every month in your newsletter that's a reference to a clinic, especially your staff. So primarily, this newsletter is going to be speaking to and giving information to your sterile processing staff. So you definitely want to load that up with information and updates that are going to be directly applicable to your sterile processing team. All right, so that's kind of how you put it together. That's what you would put in it. Those are the tools you should use. I've already kind of assumed the regularity that you would be putting this thing out. And I think once a month is a good pace. It's doable. You need to go every other month, not the end of the world. But as you start spreading out the regularity of these releases, it loses a bit of the momentum. Folks forget that it's going on every 2 months or every 3 months. They forget that it's actually going on. That's going to be important again here in a moment when we bring up the impact that this tool, that these newsletters can have on your department. Who writes it? I've kind of assumed here at the beginning that it's going to be the sterile processing manager or the sterile processing leader, but it doesn't have to be that. If you're a sterile processing technician or lead tech or supervisor or quality assurance manager or instrument coordinator, and you like writing or you enjoy putting these kind of creative things together, you like communicating, like giving updates, it could be you. You could be the one in charge of drafting up your department newsletter every month. So it doesn't have to be the manager. Now, I would argue and encourage that your department leader should be involved in this newsletter no matter what. Even if they're not the one writing it, they need to be reading it in draft form. They need to be giving feedback on the kinds of information that they want involved. They need to be contributing in information, even if they're not writing the whole newsletter. But it doesn't have to be solely driven by the manager. And in fact, I would argue again that it is more valuable the more contributors that you get involved in creating the newsletter. So back in the day, when I was doing my first newsletter, my first department, I kind of made it an assignment for all of our department leaders to contribute a couple of paragraphs every month to the newsletter. So we would have a supervisor's corner what we called it. And so every month I would have a couple of paragraphs in there from the supervisors talking about whatever topic they wanted to talk about that month. It could be uh, the new label process, uh, of where we're going to put the labels for our pill packs. It could be the new quality assurance process where we're going to be taking trays off the shelf in a randomized basis to proactively QA for quality issues before they get to the OR. It can be a million things, but the idea is to add those diverse perspectives from your supervisors, from your frontline technicians, from your OR liaisons, from your manager, to really build a newsletter that someone inside and outside of the department could read it and get a good pulse on the culture of the team, on the progress of the team, on the thoughtfulness of the team, that you're really thinking through these challenges that come into a complex department in a busy department like sterile processing. And the more insight and perspectives that you can build in, the richer and fuller that newsletter will be. I mentioned a second ago, for the contributors, a couple of paragraphs. And this is very important. We're not looking for a 20-page newsletter that every article in that newsletter has to be 1,000 words or 1,500 words. No, you can really pack a lot of great insight and perspective and content into just a couple of paragraphs per section, to give plenty of space again for multiple opinions, multiple perspectives in each newsletter that's maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 pages long per month. In addition to those contributions, obviously, I mentioned data is a great thing to include, and you don't have to necessarily write anything about the data. It can just be a standard data update that you want to update your customers in the operating room, for instance, on the number of instruments that were repaired this month. What does that data point tell your customers? Well, it tells them that you're paying attention to the quality of your surgical instruments. It gives them a little bit of insight on potentially on some care and handling issues, or on the age of your instrumentation. If you've got a lot of repairs going on or a lot of replacements going on for your instrumentation, that's showing up in your data every month, folks start to see, man, we're really repairing a lot of our endoscopes every month, or we're repairing a lot of our rigid scopes every month. Is there something going on? Right? Those are great questions for your customers in the OR to be asking themselves, even outside of asking that about your own data as a sterile processing team. Putting that data out in front in a newsletter and amongst a lot of other information is just a great low pressure way to tell multiple people at one time, hey, we got a care and handling issue with our delicate eye instruments, because this is how many eye instruments that we had to repair in the month of September. Are you tracking with me? In addition to just giving transparency to data, though, putting those data metrics out every month allows for you to better tell the story of improvement in your department as well. A great data point that we used to put in our newsletters was the number of missing instruments from the total inventory. And at one time we had thousands. I think the highest number maybe was 2,000 individual instruments missing out of the total inventory. Massive number. So when we started doing these newsletters on a regular basis. We put that big fat number out there. We weren't afraid of it. And in fact, I was excited about that big number because I knew that we were going to be able to tackle it. And the bigger the number is that you start, the bigger victory it is when you overcome it at the very end. So we started talking about 2,000 instruments missing. Over the months, that number started coming down, breaking down to below 1,000, breaking down to below 500, coming all the way down to below 50, below 20 on a regular basis. Now, you're rarely going to have an inventory that has no missing instruments at all, right? So like if an instrument goes missing on a Monday and it's a unique instrument, it's going to take a couple days to put that order in if you don't have a backup there. So there's going to be some missing instruments, but in sharing that data publicly again on a monthly basis to your customers, to your C-suite, it signals that you know that missing instruments are a problem, that you've identified this problem, that you're tracking this problem, and that you are making progress in reducing that missing instrument inventory on a regular basis, and you're sustaining that change. All of that comes out, and that story is told in this department newsletter. Right, so we've got some contributions from across the staff. We're sharing data. Of course, this is a great place to recognize your employees, not just for certifications. It's a great place to recognize your employees for their anniversaries in the department. So-and-so has been here 5 years. They've been there 10 years. This is their 20-year anniversary. Please join us in celebrating. If you see Johnny in the hallway, say congrats for being here 20 years in the health system. It's a great way to recognize folks who get promotions in your department. That Susie has now been promoted to lead tech on second shift. So if you've got any questions for what's going on in second shift, Al's using your new contacts. You can put all that kind of information on a regular basis, again, in this newsletter. Just send it out across the facility. And when I'm talking about across the facility, I mean it. When we send out our newsletter, I got emails from every person that worked in the operating room, the anesthesia techs, the nurses, the surgeons, all the OR leadership, all the coordinators. I got contact information for any customer that is serviced by Sterile Processing. All the clinics, respiratory therapy, ER, on and on. If you've got any device coming through Sterile Processing, you're getting a copy of our monthly newsletter. And then I went up the chain. I got contact information for everybody up my vertical, including in Sterile Process or in supply chain. But any executive, any vice president, any director, all the way up into the C-suite, the chief nursing officer, the CEO, the chief finance officer, everybody included in that little pyramid of Sterile Processing to the very, very top. I'm mailing a copy of our newsletter to them on a regular basis. And especially for the C-suite, I would print off actual physical copies in color of this newsletter and march my happy little butt down to the C-suite once a month and drop off these copies to the secretary there and ask, hey, can you please make sure that these copies get on their desk? That way they can see what's going on in Sterile Processing. This is the key. So that why send it out to all those people? Do I think all those people are going to open a newsletter every month and just excitedly consume all this news about Sterile Processing? No. Realistically, the majority of them probably are not going to open the email. However, some will. And the ones that do, they're going to see some great content. They're going to learn some great things. They're going to see all the recognition. They're going to track the progress, just as we were talking about. But even if they don't open that email, What you're telling them every month is something is going on down in sterile processing. Every single month, they get a reminder in amidst every other email that they're getting. They get a reminder that something's going on down there. I don't know what it is because I'm not taking the time to open the emails, but something's going on. Let me give you another perspective on that. Let's just say that you start publishing this email uh, in this newsletter that we're talking about every month. As a sterile processing leader, I want you to look around the next time that you're in a big leadership meeting in your hospital at all the other departments in the hospital. And there's lots of them, right? There's a lot of managers, there's a lot of directors. Look around at all those other departments, the ER, pain management, endoscopy, pre-op, post-op, all of the different floors, right? Like med surg, ICU. Look around at all the other managers. I can almost guarantee you not a single one of them are creating a newsletter in the way that we're talking about today. Not a one. In your whole hospital is creating and crafting an update email with data, with recognition, with insights from across their staff, and sending that out to everyone that's involved with or a customer of their department. Nobody else is doing it. So you may be sitting there, if you're one personality, thinking, well, if no one else is doing it, Hank, why do I need to do it? All right. But there's another personality out there saying, oh my goodness, you're right. And if I start doing this, I can spearhead cultural change in my entire hospital. I can put myself and my department on the map in my entire facility as that department that's got their crap together. That department that's doing everything they can to improve the process, to make positive change, to transparently communicate their progress. You put yourself on the radar of the C-suite in a positive way, not in the way that that's the department that now, across the nation, 70% of the Joint Commission findings happen in sterile processing, right? That's not the way that we want to get on the radar of the C-suite. What we do want to get on, and how we do want to get on, is through these kinds of positive recognition, positive arguments that there is something actively good going on in sterile processing today. That's what a newsletter gets you, guys. That's why I'm so hot on making this happen for your team. If you want to talk some more about it, give me a call, shoot me an email, hank@beyondclean.net. I'd love to talk some more. I'd love to proofread your newsletter if you're getting it together. The most important part of this, guys, is just get started. It doesn't have to be perfect. Get started. You will learn what people like. You will get better over time. You should see my first newsletter compared to the later newsletters that we put together. Quality will come, but progress will not come unless you get off your butt, sit down in a chair, type this thing up, get a coalition of contributors together in your department, and make this thing happen for your team, for your department, for your facility. I promise you will see that cultural change that I'm talking about, and you will get on the radar in all the ways that you need, not only for the C-suite, but also for your surgeons and your customers in the operator room. Go get it done today, guys. Keep fighting dirty. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon.